I still remember the exact second my breath caught in my throat. Not because of what happened, but because of what it meant. My eyes registered something my mind refused to accept at first, and my heart responded before logic had a chance to intervene. I stood there frozen, pretending to look anywhere but directly at the truth forming right in front of me. A rush of disbelief, heat, and fear tangled inside my chest. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself I was imagining things. But my body knew better. And in that moment, I understood. This was the beginning of something I would not be able to undo. At home, life had become quiet in a way that felt heavier than shouting. We lived side by side, shared space, shared routines, but not much else anymore. Conversations were practical, trimmed down to necessities. How was your day? Did you eat? Don't forget tomorrow. The kind of words that fill silence without touching anything real. Nights ended with backs turned, not out of anger, just habit. I told myself this was normal. Long relationships settle, passion fades, people grow comfortable. But comfort, I was learning, can look a lot like loneliness when you're the only one still reaching. That I missed being seen. Not admired, not desired in some dramatic way, just noticed. I missed someone looking at me like I mattered in that moment, like my presence altered the air around them. My partner wasn't cruel or unfaithful. That almost made it worse. There was no villain to blame, no explosion to justify the emptiness. Just slow erosion. Day after day of feeling smaller, quieter, easier to overlook. I started questioning myself in mirrors, wondering when I became someone forgettable. That's when he entered my life. Not with drama. Not with intention. Just there. Close enough to notice things others didn't. The way my mood shifted before I said a word. The way I laughed when I was nervous. He listened, really listened, not waiting for his turn to speak. At first it felt harmless. Friendly. Refreshing. I told myself I deserved conversation that didn't feel like a chore. I deserved to feel human again. There was a difference in the energy when he was around. Subtle, but undeniable. Conversations lingered longer than necessary. Silence didn't feel awkward, it felt charged. I became aware of my hands, my posture, the way I breathed. I caught myself replaying his words later, smiling at nothing. And that scared me. Because I knew the rules. I knew how these stories usually begin. With denial. With, "It's innocent." With small permissions that feel too insignificant to matter. That I started noticing the distance at home more sharply. Every unanswered message, every distracted nod felt amplified. I didn't create the comparison on purpose, but it formed anyway. One presence felt dull and heavy, the other light and electric. I hated myself for noticing. I hated myself more for wanting that feeling again. The moment that changed everything didn't look dramatic from the outside. No one else would have noticed. It was brief. Silent. But something shifted between us. A look held a second too long. A pause where neither of us moved away. My body reacted before my mind could stop it, and that terrified me. I felt exposed, like my thoughts had suddenly become visible. I looked away first, heart pounding, pretending nothing had happened while knowing everything had. The guilt came fast, sharp and suffocating. I told myself I had crossed no real line. There was no touch, no confession, no betrayal I could point to. And yet, something inside me had already stepped somewhere it didn't belong. I went home that night and lay awake beside someone who trusted me, staring into the dark, replaying a moment that wouldn't let me go. That I knew then that this wasn't about him alone. It was about what I had been missing. What I had ignored. What I had allowed to starve quietly inside me. And as much as I wanted to rewind, to choose safety and familiarity, a part of me was already leaning forward, curious and afraid, knowing that once you feel that kind of pull, pretending it never happened is the hardest lie of all. After that moment, things didn't explode the way I expected. They unraveled slowly, almost politely. We didn't acknowledge what had passed between us, but it lived in the space we shared. Every time our paths crossed, I felt it waiting there, unspoken and heavy. Conversations that once felt casual now carried weight. Words lingered. Silences stretched. I became hyper-aware of him, of how close he stood, of how easily my attention drifted toward him. Even when I told myself not to doubt, I started looking forward to the smallest interactions. A question that didn't need asking. A comment meant only for me. It felt ridiculous how little it took to make my heart react. I told myself it was harmless, that enjoying someone's company didn't make me unfaithful. But deep down, I knew I was already protecting something I shouldn't be. I chose my words carefully around others. I kept parts of conversations just between us. That secrecy didn't feel wrong at first, it felt special.At home. The contrast grew impossible to ignore. My partner spoke, and I nodded. He reached out, and I responded out of habit, not desire. I hated myself for the comparison, yet my mind did it automatically. One connection felt flat and predictable. The other felt alive, charged with possibility. I wasn't falling in love, I told myself. I was just awake again. But even that sounded like an excuse when I said it in my head. That I caught myself making small changes. Dressing with more care. Checking my reflection before leaving. Wondering if he would notice. Those thoughts came with immediate guilt, followed by justification. Wanting to feel attractive didn't make me a bad person. Wanting attention didn't erase my commitment. I clung to those rationalizations like lifelines, even as they began to fray. Then came the moment that stripped away my illusions. We were standing close enough to feel each other's presence without touching. The conversation had stalled, suspended in something heavier than words. I felt the shift before I saw it. His reaction was instinctive, unguarded, and unmistakable. My breath caught, shock racing through me. It wasn't the physical reality that overwhelmed me, it was what it revealed. Desire. Real, undeniable desire, mirrored by the heat rushing through my own body. That I looked away instantly, heart pounding, cheeks burning. He noticed. Of course he did. The air thickened, filled with embarrassment and something dangerously close to longing. No one spoke. No one moved. And in that frozen second, I realized how far things had gone without a single deliberate step. This wasn't imagination. This wasn't harmless. This was mutual. That I walked away first, my legs unsteady, mind racing. Every instinct screamed that I had to put distance between us. But distance didn't erase the image burned into my thoughts. It followed me home, sat with me at dinner, lay beside me in bed. I replayed it over and over, hating myself for how deeply it affected me. I had crossed a line I couldn't redraw. The guilt became louder after that. I found myself avoiding his eyes, then seeking them out moments later. I told myself I needed clarity, that silence would only make things worse. Another lie. The truth was, part of me wanted acknowledgement. Wanted him to confirm that I hadn't imagined the intensity of that moment.At home. I felt like an imposter. Every normal gesture felt dishonest. My partner trusted me, laughed with me, spoke about the future, unaware that my thoughts were elsewhere. That knowledge sat heavy in my chest. I wasn't just betraying him with another person, I was betraying the version of myself I believed in, that I knew I should end whatever this was becoming. I knew the right thing was to step back, rebuild what I had neglected, confront the emptiness at home instead of escaping it. But knowing and doing are different things. Desire doesn't vanish just because you name it. And once you recognize that someone wants you in a way you've been starving for, it becomes dangerously easy to justify staying close, even when every part of you understands the cost. After that, I stopped pretending this was accidental. Every interaction carried intention, even when we said nothing. I became careful in ways that betrayed me more than honesty ever could. I checked my surroundings before speaking to him. I lowered my voice without realizing it. My phone became something I guarded, turned face down, locked, kept close. Each small act of secrecy carved the truth deeper into my conscience. Sleep stopped coming easily. When it did, it was shallow and restless. I'd wake up with my heart racing, mind already replaying fragments of conversations and glances. I wasn't dreaming about touch or fantasy, I was trapped in the weight of anticipation and fear. The worst part wasn't wanting him. It was wanting to be wanted, and knowing that desire had found a place to root itself.At home, the distance could no longer be hidden. My partner noticed the shifts before I did. The way I paused before answering. The way I seemed elsewhere even when sitting right beside him. He asked if something was wrong, and I said no too quickly. The lie came out smooth, practiced, and that terrified me. I had always believed I wasn't capable of this kind of deception. Turns out, capability appears the moment you decide to protect a secret. Messages became more frequent, though never explicit. They didn't need to be. Meaning lived between the lines. A simple check-in carried weight. A late reply sparked anxiety. I felt ridiculous, emotionally dependent on crumbs of attention, yet unable to stop. Every time my phone buzzed, my pulse jumped. Every time it stayed silent, I felt hollow. There was a moment of clarity that arrived without warning. I was standing alone, staring at my reflection, trying to recognize myself. I realized then that the betrayal had already happened. Not in action, but in loyalty. My emotional energy, my anticipation, my excitement, none of it belonged where it was supposed to. I had shifted my center without admitting it out loud. That realization didn't bring relief. It brought panic. I started imagining consequences I had tried not to name. The look on my partner's face if he knew. The collapse of trust. The quiet aftermath that follows truth once it's exposed. I told myself I would end it, that I would choose the life I had built over the temptation threatening it. I meant it in that moment. I really did, but resolve weakened quickly when faced with reality. Avoiding him felt like withdrawal. The absence was loud, almost painful. When we finally crossed paths again, all my rehearsed distance dissolved. He looked at me differently now, more careful, more aware. The tension between us wasn't playful anymore. It was heavy with everything we weren't saying that we didn't touch. We didn't confess. But standing there, sharing silence thick with restraint, felt more dangerous than any reckless act. I understood then that restraint doesn't erase desire, it sharpens it. And the longer it's denied, the more power it gathers.At home that night, my partner reached for me, a rare gesture that once would have meant everything. I froze. Not visibly, but internally. Guilt surged so hard it almost made me sick. I responded because I was supposed to, not because I felt present. Lying there afterward, staring at the ceiling, I knew I was breaking something precious in slow motion. The fear of discovery crept into everything. I imagined my phone lighting up at the wrong time. A name spoken too casually. A look held too long in front of someone else. Living like that was exhausting. And yet, part of me clung to the risk. Because risk meant this mattered. Because ending it meant facing the emptiness I had been running from, that I told myself I was still in control. That I could step back before real damage was done. But control is an illusion once you've already crossed the line that matters most, the one inside your own mind. And standing there, balanced between truth and collapse, I could feel the ground shifting beneath me, even as I tried to pretend everything was still intact. The end didn't come with shouting or chaos. It arrived quietly, the way truth often does when it has nowhere left to hide. There was a look on my partner's face one evening that told me something had shifted. Not anger. Not accusation. Just awareness. The kind that doesn't need proof because it recognizes distance. In that moment, I understood that even if no words were spoken, something had already been lost. That he asked me if I was happy. Not accusingly. Genuinely. The question landed heavier than any confrontation could have. I opened my mouth to answer and realized I didn't know how to be honest without destroying us. Silence stretched between us, thick and uncomfortable. That silence became the confession. I saw it in his eyes when he looked away. Trust doesn't shatter loudly. It fades when certainty disappears. After that, everything felt hollow. We moved through the days politely, carefully, like people afraid of stepping on broken glass. I kept waiting for anger, for grief, for something explosive. But what settled in instead was numbness. I had wanted to feel alive again, and now I felt nothing at all. The irony wasn't lost on me that I stopped hearing from him around the same time. Not dramatically. No final message. Just absence. I told myself that was for the best, that distance would make things clearer. But clarity didn't come. Only questions. Only the echo of something that never fully existed yet still managed to change everything. I wondered if he missed me the way I missed the version of myself I used to be. At night, regret surfaced in waves. Not just regret for what almost happened, but for what I neglected long before that. I thought about all the moments I had checked out, all the times I chose silence over honesty. I blamed loneliness, routine, distance, but the truth was harder. I hadn't fought for what I had. I had let myself drift, then acted surprised when something else pulled me in. My partner never asked for details. Maybe he didn't want them. Maybe he already knew enough. The restraint hurt more than accusations would have. It left space for imagination, and imagination is cruel. I wanted to confess everything just to end the uncertainty, but confession would have been selfish. It would have been about easing my guilt, not healing what remained. There were moments I caught him watching me, like he was trying to decide who I was now. That look stayed with me. I had become someone capable of hurting the person who trusted me most, even without crossing the line everyone talks about. That realization sat heavier than any label could. Time passed, but resolution never arrived neatly. Some wounds don't close, they dull. We existed in a version of together that felt fragile, conditional. I didn't know if love could survive that kind of quiet fracture. I didn't know if it should. Sometimes I think about the moment that started it all. How small it was. How easily I could have stepped away. I wonder if desire always announces itself so subtly, or if we just ignore the warning signs because acknowledging them would force us to choose differently. What I know now is this: infidelity doesn't begin with touch. It begins with permission. With the choice to look twice, to stay a little longer, to protect a feeling you shouldn't have. And once that choice is made, everything that follows is just consequence that I'm left standing in the aftermath, unsure of what the future holds. Whether rebuilding is possible, or whether some breaks are simply lessons you carry forward. There's no dramatic ending, no clean moral. Just the quiet understanding that wanting to feel alive cost me more than I ever expected, and that some truths, once seen, can never be unseen.